Welcome to International Folk Dancing for Kids. All media materials are used here for educational purposes only. Ordog Utja is a dance of the Congo people from Hungary. It's taught here by Andrew Carney. It's in 2/4 time. You do it in a completely closed circle with your hands down in V position. You start by going to the right. Start at the beginning of any musical phrase. The next dance we're going to learn is called Ordog Utja, which is from the eastern part of Hungary. You're going to start by doing a series of steps to the right and a series of steps to the left, and then you do a step in place. Your hands are down and you're in a closed circle. We start by going to our own right with 3 step behinds, or 2 step behinds and a step. 1, 2, step, and then we do 2 stamps. Stamp, stamp. Then we do the same thing to the left. Step, behind, step, behind, step, stamp, stamp. Step, behind, step, behind, step, stamp, stamp. Step, behind, step, behind, step, stamp, stamp. That's the first part. Once you've done that, you go right, left, right, left. You're going to do a little step in place. We go forward in place, back in place, forward in place, back in place, forward in place, back in place, stamp, stamp, stamp. What you're doing is you're rocking forward on your right foot, back in place on your left, back on your right foot, in place on your left. Forward in place, back in place. 2 and 3, and then 3 stamps. Stamp, stamp, stamp. Let's try that again. Forward in place, back in place. Forward in place, back in place. Forward in place, back in place, stamp, stamp, stamp. And you do that twice. So it's step together, step, stamp, stamp. 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 Forward in place, back in place. 2 and 3 and stamp, stamp, stamp. Do it again. Forward in place, back in place. Forward in place, back in place. In place, back in place, and stamp, stamp, stamp. Step behind, step, 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 stamp, stamp. Forward in place, back in place, forward in place, back in place, back in place, stamp, stamp, stamp again. Forward in place, back in place, forward in place, back in place, back in place, stamp, stamp, stamp. That's the whole dance. It does get a lot faster. Ördog Utja. To recap, in the first part of the dance, you're going to travel to your own right, starting with your right foot. Step right, right, stamp, stamp. Then you do the same thing to the left. Left, behind, left, stamp, stamp. You do that all over again. Step behind, step, stamp, stamp. Step behind, step, stamp, stamp. In the second part of the dance, you're going to do your rocking. You rock forward into the center, back, then you rock back and forward. Forward in place, back in place, forward in place, back in place, forward in place, back in place, and then you do 3 stamps with the right foot, stamp, 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 and you do that all again.